That's Barrett Strong to start the show. And money, that's what I want, which is quite appropriate. We've got a new slot on the third Monday of each month. We're going to be speaking to our very own money man, independent financial advisor Victor Sachs, talking about the hot money topics of the day. So that's coming up every third Monday of each month. So if you have any questions for Victor, then you can get through to us at studio@hcrfm.co.uk. Good evening, Victor.
Good evening, Scott.
Welcome along.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
First time on the radio?
Indeed.
Now, Victor, you're an independent financial advisor. For those of people that don't know what that means or what the difference is between an independent financial advisor and I think there's something called a restricted financial advisor. Just explain what it means and what the difference is for us.
Absolutely. An independent financial advisor can give advice on the whole spectrum of protection policies, investments, pension schemes, and even unregulated collective schemes, whatever's out there, an IFA can give advice on. A restricted advisor will be restricted. It's an awful word, restricted. It just means that they're deciding to concentrate on various areas. They don't want to stray too far into pension or investment or protection spectrum. And unfortunately, the only way someone finds out is whether a practice or an individual is restricted is to ask, because it's not displayed. It's rarely displayed on a business card. It might just say financial advisor, and to ask, and if you are restricted, where do the restrictions lie? So
they may, for example, just concentrate on certain types of products, like investment products or pensions or whatever. They restricted to a certain type of advice. Is that right?
Correct. I mean, they might say that they, will turn around and say, well, look, we'll deal with a few companies. We won't offer the full range.
I see.
We may not give advice on unregulated collective investment schemes because maybe they just don't want to get involved with those types of areas. And 99.9% of restricted advisors will do a fantastic job for the majority of clients that are out there.
And there are a lot of people go for financial advice to their bank. It can often be the first port of call. But there are dangers with that, isn't there? Because I imagine that the bank's only going to sell you their own products, and sometimes that may not be the best solution for you.
Scott, you've walked into something there, because for 18 years I worked for a bank as an independent financial advisor. I think for about the first 20 minutes of my discussion with a client was having to let them know that actually, yes, although employed by a big bank, I actually had the full spectrum of companies to go to.
Okay, so I made a misunderstanding there.
No, it's a common one. Nowadays, because of rules and regulations change, a lot of banks have decided that they're not going to maintain that independent financial advice practice, or if they are, it's going to be for their very high net worth clients. But if someone walks into their branch today, they'll be given advice. It will probably be from the bank or a couple of companies, but it may be on a restricted basis, but it could be on an IFA basis. It really does depend on what that high street bank was offering.
And the best way, as you say, to find out is to ask.
We'll either ask, or there's various websites. You can look at unbiased.co.uk, and that will give you a list of advisors in the area. But there are lots of companies that just turn around and market themselves either as a, dare I say it, as a street name, or as a or a practice name, and it will just say financial advisors. There may be that call just to say, look, are you independent? Are you restricted? And if you're restricted, where is that restriction?
Okay. And what kind of things do you normally get people coming in to seek advice about? And what kind of products and help can you offer them?
Historically, I've always worked with businesses and business owners. Working within the bank, I was in their corporate sector, which dealt with businesses that very high turnovers, up to 50 million, that actually got me in front of councils. In my last few years, I'm now working with micro businesses, 1 to 10 employees. And in saying that, I'm getting more and more requests to help people who are coming up to retirement. They've now got their pension scheme. They're ready to take benefits. And obviously what's gone on in the last year, 18 months in that pension landscape has meant it isn't just as straightforward as signing the paperwork and sorting pensions out. There's a lot more options out there.
Sure. No. I mean, a lot of it's been quite widely publicised after the budget back in March. There were some big changes. We'll talk about that later. But for small businesses, what kind of things is it do they tend to talk to you about, Victor?
The small business owner is someone who invariably has been employed.
Yeah.
And whilst he's been employed or she's been employed, they've enjoyed some nice employee benefits. And when you step out, obviously, into your own wide world, then those benefits, and including the basic salary, has just disappeared. So it's trying to replicate those benefits that were once there. So talking to very brand new businesses about that, but also in terms of recognising that they've lost their company pension scheme, they've lost their associated benefits, trying to replicate, and it's more about protecting income if they're sick, if they're ill, if they can't work.
Yes,
what happens?
I was going to say, because it depends what kind of nature of the self-employment or the work that you're doing. But if it's of a physical nature, for example, and you break a leg or you have some debilitating disease and you're unable to work, then obviously you're not going to be earning any money.
Totally agree. But then even if you look at someone that spends their life, I don't know, search engine optimization, the life coaches, the big new services businesses that are coming on, that in my world is a wrist break.
Yeah.
You break your wrist, you can't use the computer. And so with the best will in the world, you can't use things. And it's as you say, normally protecting someone's income was either if they drive for a living or if they're they're a landscape gardener or they're doing real heavy lifting stuff. In this day and age now, the majority of small business owners tend to be service providers, and it's looking beyond.
So we're not talking so much as about breaking legs. We're talking about things like strokes or cancer or some long-term illness that prevents them from earning any money.
Absolutely, but also down to I went skiing and I've broken my arm, or I've got something in my eye and I can't see the computer screen. And or even the household fall down the stairs. It's that leg break or whatever that means that, or arm break. They're saying, actually, I can't use the mouse. And this is going to prevent someone in these new micro businesses from earning money. And these are the discussions that I would have with a business owner.
Now, you're not going to be able to answer this question, Victor, because, of course, you're going to tell me it all depends on the circumstances of the individual and the age and their health.
Don't ask me the cost.
Medical records. Well, I was going to say, just to give people a rough idea, because some people might think it's very expensive, and it isn't, and it not necessarily is. It's very expensive to get that kind of cover.
There are a lot of variances, Scott. And
I understand.
at the end of the day, it is very, very difficult. But you would have to guess that a small business is therefore turnover and profitability is not. Maybe not quite happening. We're just looking to cover bare essentials, but I would say somewhere between £30 and £50 a month, is going to get someone, even if it's enough to cover a mortgage payment or rent and some food and everything else. And maybe that can come into play 3 months or 6 months after an illness. The aim is to try and work with that business owner and say, look, what have you got in your store cupboard in terms of cash? You've walked into a brand new business, you've set this up. Have you just literally taken the biggest leap of faith ever? And day one you were employed, and day two you're now self-employed, and there's nothing in the cupboard.
Well, a lot of people that are employed often have. All right, there's statutory sick pay and so on, but often their employers will go that extra bit further, won't they? And they'll support their employees for a longer period of sickness.
Yes,
and they'll give you at least, maybe not full pay, but they will pay a certain percentage of your salary for a prolonged period of time. It all depends on the contract, of course.
Yes,
but when you're self-employed, you get nothing.
Absolutely, your SSP is there's something there. I'm not going to say there's nothing there. There's something there. But once you're self-employed, you're very much reliant on yourself and your own savings and your own ability to continue. And a lot of my friends who are self-employed, who I can't reach into their pockets and say you must, but don't. The amount of times they go to work, I've got a good few friends of mine in London, are London taxi drivers, and their back is shocking. They're almost walking as though they're sitting, but they can't not go to work because there's nothing that's going to kick in to provide them with an income.
So obviously I'm not going to hold you to it, but for a relatively a low monthly outlay, less than the cost of a satellite TV subscription, you can get cover that will cover you for those prolonged periods of illnesses or disabilities, so to speak.
Most definitely. You know, if someone turned around and said, you know, I have this joke with guys, you know, guys, girls like a beer, go down the pub or whatever. And you turn around and say to them, okay, for every second pint you have, just put that to one side.
Yeah.
And, you know, put £3 a day away.
Yeah.
You know, don't drink it, have a Diet Coke, have a whatever. And that is going to be of some, you know, that's going to really go some way to protecting those that you're working to provide for.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Victor. We're going to have to take a short break for some ads and a little bit more music, and we'll be back with Victor right after this.
HCR 104 FM proudly presents Live in the Park on Saturday the 6th.
We are indeed talking about money this evening. It's 7:27. We're talking about money with our very own money man, independent financial advisor Victor Sachs. Victor, we were just talking before about small businesses and the cover that they can obtain to cover them in periods of illness and so on.
Yep.
Big topic at the moment, though, obviously, is pensions. There's been a huge change in the whole regime surrounding pensions that's been introduced recently. Just tell us a little bit about that, if you can.
Well,
I know it's a complicated area, but try and
I'll try. You got to get. See, we go back to 2008, and Alistair Darling stood up and announced to the world that all business owners and anyone who employs anybody is going to have to start talking about a pension scheme to their employees. So fast forward that now, George Osborne stands up and says, yeah, we're doing that, but we're going to bring it in a shorter time scale. So the effect there where anyone who employs anybody, so I employ my wife, I'm going to have to start talking to her about setting up a pension scheme for her. If I was running my own business and I'm the 100% owner-director, then no, I don't have to worry about it.
This is different from... People will remember stakeholder pensions that were introduced years ago. Yeah. And there was correct me if I'm wrong, Victor, but there was an obligation on the employer to offer a pension, stakeholder pension to the employees, but there was no obligation for them to contribute.
Correct.
So I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, but a lot of employers said, okay, we'll offer you this scheme, we're not going to contribute. There's no incentive then for the employee to take it up.
Correct.
And I think that was the big downfall.
It was, and at the time it was brought in April 2001, and there was this big task force that was meant to go out in September 2001. And obviously, unfortunately, that was the year of the Twin Towers coming down, and the whole world's focus changed, and pensions wasn't really that big on the agenda. Fast forward to now, when various governments look back over the years and say, what have we done to try and encourage people to make their own way into their pension? The show, there's not enough hours in the day to start talking about why and everything else.
Fundamentally, I mean, people will know that the people are living longer, basically. So you've got much more. I think I read somewhere recently where, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, the retirement age for men was 65, for women was 60. The average age for a man probably was about 70, 71. So he was probably drawing a pension for 5 or 6 years. In this day and age, you could live to 80, 85, 90. You could be drawing a pension for 20, 25 years.
Correct. And the plan was that the guy who, going back to that time scale, he set up his pension when he was 20, when he joined the bank, the building site, wherever he was working. So he'd funded for 40 years and lived for about 5 to 10. Yeah. Now, is 40 years going to sustain us for 30 or 40 years? It's not inconceivable for someone
that you could be retired longer than you were working.
Absolutely. And then when you bring in self-employed people, etc., people run their own businesses, great accountants such as yourself, Scott, turn around and say to people, pay yourself a small salary, big dividend, so you're not paying in national insurance contributions, so you're not coming into the system. Let's face it, the NI system is a Ponzi scheme in any other way, shape or form. You're paying in now, and hopefully when you get to 65, you'll get it. There's not enough money going in, so the government has tried over the last 30, 40 years to get people, and now they've finally just turned around and said to the employer, you're not only going to offer it, but if you've got people in your workforce who are over the age of 21 or 22, say under the age of 74, only more than £10,000 a year, they are automatically going into a pension scheme.
And what contribution does the employer have to make? And what contribution? Because this will affect people that are employed as well, won't it? Of course.
Absolutely. Because if they're not having the conversation, if the people are sitting there listening to the show and they're employed and they're in a business that may have, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 people, this is on its way.
Your employer should be having those conversations with you pretty much now.
If anything, the pension regulator will be sending out a letter for the employers out there saying, this is your stage date. They would have taken the head count based on 6th of April 2012, and regardless whether your head count as employees have gone up or down, as far as the pension regulator is concerned, it's the numbers that were there at that time.
Right.
And so the simple rules, I say simple, it's the government here, that they all say anyone that earns up to £5,772 a year becomes what's called an entitled worker. And what entitled means is you can join into a pension scheme if your employer's going to offer it to you, but the employer doesn't have to contribute.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yep. If someone is earning between £5,700 and £10,000, they're now called what is known as non-eligible, which means they can join a pension scheme. And if that joins, then your employer will pay in as well. And as we come into these kind of areas, we're probably looking at 1 or 2% contribution per member.
Uh-huh.
So if the employee puts in 2%,
the employer has to
put in 2% as well.
Gotcha.
So this is where this whole I'm in campaign, why would you want to miss out on employer contribution? Obviously, charity starts at home first, and you've got to look at your own finances to see whether it's affordable or not. Once you're earning more than £10,000 a year,
and most people, I guess, because the minimum wage, if people are on full-time employment, the minimum wage will take them above 10,000. So we're talking about part-time workers, I guess.
Indeed,
there, but the majority, I guess, would be over 10.
The main area of workforce where you're looking at 10,000 plus, you're dealing with someone who's over the age of 21. They're under the age. They're under state pension age.
Yep.
They're going in first.
Okay.
So unlike stakeholder was, here it is, do you want to join?
Yeah.
This is, no, here it is, you're going in, and now it's up to you. You can opt out, but 3 years after you've opted out, you'll be put back in.
Right.
And then you opt out again, and 3 years later you'll be put back in.
So an individual employee is not compelled to go into a pension scheme that's offered by their employer. But your argument would be, well, why wouldn't they?
You're not going to want to miss out on effectively free money.
Yeah, because your employer is obliged to pay a percentage into your scheme.
Correct.
To match your own, is that how it works?
To match your own,
okay.
up to certain levels that will apply.
Right.
So at the moment, one would imagine companies staging now are probably going to be looking at 2% each. Next year it will go 3 and 3, and the following year it will go 3 and 4 with the employee paying the 4%.
I see.
The government will put in 1%. So by 2019, 2020, we'll be looking at anyone who's employed is going to be paying in around having a total of 8% credit to their pension scheme.
Right.
And then the government of the day will look and say, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Do we carry on, or do we just leave it at 8%?
Yeah.
But it's an absolute minefield when you think of employees that are looking, or employers that are now looking at 1 or 2% on top of their payroll. Some businesses I meet, that's the difference between profit and loss. So it's working with employers, and how do they find this money? How does it work?
And also getting that system in place, because you mentioned earlier on that you're compelled to offer the scheme again after 3 years. But you need some kind of system in place to enable you to remember to do that, I guess.
Absolutely. The major payroll systems out there will accommodate. Yeah. There's financial planning software, which is a middleware which kind of talks to everything. But it's not only that, it's recognising, well, this person's gone from 21 to 22. Is this person earning more than 10? Now is he earning less than £10,000? It's constant monitoring. The pension scheme is part of it, but it's not just setting up a pension scheme and I'm done. It's that ongoing monitoring of people's ages and their salaries, especially if they're part-time, then they go full-time, then maybe they go key time again. The various stages of, there's 3 types of employee. What stage is anyone at any one time? So there's a lot of ongoing maintenance It's almost like asking a company to run their own state pension on a micro basis, but it's not a question of one size fits all.
So if you're a very small business and you're only employing a few people, that extra administration is going to be quite a burden.
It is, and there's going to need to be a point of contact in that small company to deal with, and generally that would be the owner.
Yeah.
At that level.
Yeah.
Yes, the accountant's there to help and assist on paperwork and processing, but I suppose you'd expect me to say this, but an advisor, a financial advisor who is not restricted in terms of pensions, can come in and help that employee and employer take a lot of that burden off their chest and give it to someone else and let them carry on doing what they do best, which is running their business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's you'd love to say there's a magic wand and someone can take it away from me, and I do meet a lot of people that will say, "Oh, my accountant will deal with it." But as well as anybody, there's real-time information, there's payroll, there's VAT, there's income tax, there's corporation tax. There's so much to do that an accountant is just not going to have the time to do everything that an employer needs to do.
Yeah. Now, the other big change that was announced, that's very interesting. Thank you for that, Victor. I think
it's a pleasure.
We'll talk about that in the future, no doubt, as all these staging dates come on the horizon.
Sure.
But the other thing you mentioned is that if you are... you need to give yourself a good run-in for this, because it's not the sort of thing that you can set up overnight. You need to give yourself a good 6-9 months to get this in place.
The pension regulators' letters will go out about a year before your actual date. And I have had employers that go, "What's this pension regulator letter? Is it a bit of spam? Sling it away." The pension regulator has yet to really bear its teeth. It's difficult for us as advisors and difficult for us as individuals and employers to think, well, are they really going to bear teeth? We saw stakeholder come in. There were lots of threats of fines and adverts being taken out in local trade press, front page, this person, etc.
Naming and shaming.
You got it. Now there was a name and shame, and it was a big company. It's certainly at a forum that I was at. A big company said, "Hey, this is the name of the company, a well-known seller of curtains and carpets, ideal for student accommodation, and maybe for investment homes or whatever." And they were brought into line, and they were publicly sort of said, "Hey, you need to clear it up." It was all put down to a misunderstanding, and okay. I'm led to believe pension regulator has teeth.
So what are the implications if employers out there fail to put something in place when they should? What are the implications?
Gratefully, the pension regulator will say, "Look, if there's a problem, if there's issues, please call us and let us know."
Right, so there'll be a slap on the wrist, a reminder.
There'll be the reminders, and it's constant calling. It's like any, maybe this is another topic in terms of anyone who's got financial problems. Anyone that doesn't make that phone call to their bank and creditors, people are going to assume you're just ignoring. And when they ignore, then the letters come. And the pension regulator will look at, £500, £1,000 daily fines until you're sorted. And ultimately, they have the right for custodial sentencing. So this is what we're told. I don't want anyone to put the pension regulator to the test. Yeah. I don't want to put my hand in the water and see if they've got teeth. You get that letter that's from the pension regulator. You're an employer. Talk to someone, talk to your accountant, talk to your advisor and say, "Look, I've had this. Is it spam? Is this real? What do I do? Can you help me, please?"
That's the lesson then. That's the lesson. So according to Victor, and I think it's very wise advice, if you do get this letter through, first thing you should do is pick up the phone and speak to your independent financial advisor to get something moving.
Yeah, or your accountant. Scott, you'd know what to do and where to advise someone.
Yeah, great. All right, thanks, Victor. We'll take another short break for some music and ads, and we'll be back with Victor in a few minutes' time. It's 7:45. You're back with Scott Phoebe, over to you. We're speaking to our very own money man, independent financial advisor Victor Sachs. We were talking earlier on, Victor, just about pensions. Now, it's such a huge area that we're never going to cover it all in one show. But there was another major we talked about auto-enrolment,
yep.
which is a big change that's occurred in recent years. Another major change that got a little bit, or quite a lot of publicity actually, after the budget was at the other end of the pension when you can draw money out. And there was all this talk about old people buying Ferraris and squandering their pensions and all this kind of stuff. Just tell us about what changed in the budget.
It was interesting, Gordon Brown, I think, stood up in 2003 and kind of said, don't have to buy annuities. And he must have said it really quietly because no one really got it.
Yeah.
And Osborne stands up in 2014 and really shouts from the rafters, you don't have to buy an annuity.
So under the previous rules, just for those people that are not sure what annuities are,
of course,
the fund that was accumulated in your pension, you were able to take a certain amount as a lump sum, tax-free, when you reach the age of 55, was it?
55 personal, but the doors of personal pension plans open and you could take a quarter of your fund that you've built up as tax-free cash.
Now, the other 3/4, you had to buy what's called an annuity.
Yeah, which is a way of, once they, annuity is based on client's age, their health, their sex, and from that, and the current interest rates that are around at that time.
And that basically guarantees you an income for the per year or whatever for the rest of your life.
Per month, per week, however it's agreed. Yeah, for the rest of your life. And if you're married, then you can elect to have half of that be passed down to your living spouse. Mm-hmm. And then upon your living spouse demise, that dies. The annuity is gone. So going back to the guy who's done 40 years at ABC company, he might have a £500,000 pension pot. He takes his £125,000 tax-free cash. So excited that he dies. Right? And the 375 is then used to then buy an annuity at half that rate that he would have got for his wife, who's so excited that she dies.
And that's it. It's gone.
And that's it. So it's £370,000 that goes back to the annuity company, right? Whoever's been the provider.
Yeah. Now, what's changed then? What's changed?
The change is now that for those people going back to whether it's a bank, building society, whatever, big firm with final salary pension schemes, etc. I'm not going to say here in terms of give advice what you shouldn't do. Your option is no change. You can still, take tax-free cash and buy an annuity from your pension provider, or you can, look to move that somewhere else, and either one, take your cash, draw your income off at a rate that you choose, up to certain guidelines. Mm-hmm. You might decide to take no income 1 year, and you can carry on taking an income, and then upon your demise, that income can now continue to your spouse, and upon your spouse's demise, that fund, there'll be a tax, right? But it will be left and be able to be left to your children or grandchildren.
So that's the big change.
That's the change that came in 03 when income drawdown came into place, where Steve Wedd spoke about people buying Ferraris and Lamborghinis, is now from April next year, you can actually take your whole fund as cash.
Oh, okay.
All right, so 25% is still paid free of tax.
The other 75 you would pay tax on.
And it would be added onto your income. So if we take previous scenario, £375,000, that's going to make anyone an additional rate taxpayer at 50%.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you'll get some of it you'll pay tax at 20, some at 40, and the rest at 50%. So taking a very crude amount, you could be looking at what was 375 is now a couple of £100,000.
So whilst the option is there to go out and buy your Lamborghini, it's not very wise because you're going to be paying a whole chunk of income tax.
Correct. Or even if you decide to take £20,000-30,000 a year and decimate your fund that way, great, you're going to have fantastic, retirement. But then if God says actually you're going to live to 99. Once you've done that, £20,000, 10 years down the line, you're still living and breathing. You've spent it. Given the way that the state pension is, what they're looking to do is put in £140 a week flat rate.
Flat rate, yeah.
And that's it. So banging on the door and saying, well, please, sir, can I have some more? Whilst no answers have been given, there's a good position where they'll say, well, you've had it.
Yeah.
So the aim is that while someone retires and it's great fun, they can do what they want, careful management as to how much they draw out and how often they draw out is needed. It's almost like putting your money in brine, preserving it, and saying, okay, I want to have a good life, but I want to have a good retirement, but I also want to make sure that I've got a retirement that, as long as I'm alive. But if someone says, well, I want that, but I also want it to then, whatever's left, be able to be passed down as a legacy, well, then then there are other ways of doing that. The days of buying, going to walk and buy an annuity, aren't there. I'm not saying an annuity is not a right product. It's right for a lot of clients, but it's also right that every retiree should be made aware of all the options that are available to them, whether they're employed by a big bank or a big company, or whether they're employed by a local company.
Yeah. It's a huge, complicated
It's
area
massive,
for a lot
absolutely
of people.
ginormous, and each individual situation is personal and bespoke to them.
Sure. So again, the advice is go and see someone like yourself, Victor.
Come and see someone like me and sit down. Every advisor will turn around and give a client a free hour's chat, hour and a half, first meeting, ascertain the landscape. What does the client want to do? And then at least, the client can say, well, okay, the client and advisor can sit and talk. Do they get on?
Yeah.
There's a relationship that's going to be built, and the relationship doesn't work if people don't get on. So that's first and foremost. And then it's, okay, what does someone need? And what's the best way of doing it?
All right. Brilliant. Sage advice. Thank you very much, Victor.
Thank you,
That's
sir.
all we've got time for, I'm afraid, but I could talk for hours, and no doubt there's going to be a lot of topics coming up over the next few months with Victor on the third Monday of each month. So thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right.